All right, we're moving right along here, and that's a good thing because no pun intended, but also intended, this sermon is a beast. So we got a lot to deal with today, so forgive me. This might be a little more than you bargained for, but I didn't know how else to trim this thing down because we are in the book of the Revelation, if you'll recall. And remember, it's the book of the Revelation. It's not Revelations. It's just the book of the Revelation, and Revelation literally means unveiling. In the Greek, it's apocalypsis, and that's literally what apocalypse means, is unveiling. So that's kind of the core of what is going on in the book. Last week we were in John 1. That's a good place to start. Remember, that's kind of a prelude for the whole book. And we focused on the way in which it calls us to hold and reckon with two things that have a complicated relationship with each other, which is the unveiling of the realities of the condition of the world as it is, with the unveiling and contrasted with the vision for what the world could be. And those two things are not always in sync. Today, we're going to jump to chapter 13, where we're going to get the unveiling of the opposition to what this world could be. And not just the opposition to what this world could be, but the unveiling of the powers that be that are kind of governing the world as it is. And it's a big, huge chunk. And so we've got a lot to deal with. So there's too much to tackle in this context. So I just want to say this. If nobody comes to me afterwards, that's fine. I won't be hurt. Don't worry. But if there's like parts of the scripture that you're about to hear, if there are parts in there where you're like, what is that I don't address here because I can't address everything, I'm just going to be down, in the community room after worship, and I'll sit at a table, and anybody who's got questions, wants to talk more about this crazy chapter in the book, I'll be there. Be happy to discuss it. So with that, I'm going to invite Laura to come and read this beastly passage.
Here we go. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its fatal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" The beast was given a mouth speaking arrogant and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to speak blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to wage war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with the sword you must be killed. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived, and it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be given a brand on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the brand, that is, the name of the beast, or the number for its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number for a person. Its number is 666.
There you go. Anybody ever heard of that? The mark of the beast, 666. I mean, I knew that before I even knew anything about Jesus. It was like one of these things in our culture. Coincidentally, I can't. This is just so weird. I actually dated somebody in high school whose license plate, I am not kidding you, it was just the one that she got, was DVL 666. She was not the devil. She's a good human, but it was just strange. Anyway, so it's a thing in our culture. We'll get to it. So here we go. We've got a lot to cover, as I said. So there's this incredible podcast that I listen to nearly every week that guides a lot of my sermon prep. I've mentioned it before. It's two people. One is a Christian scholar and college professor. The other one is a rabbi, and so between the two of them, they bring a very interesting perspective. And on this one, as I was listening to the podcast, they talked about how after the rabbi had read this passage in prep for their podcast, she texted her partner, her broadcast partner, and all she said was, "Dude, chapter 13, what?" So, if you're feeling that way after hearing this reading, you're in very good company. I just wanted to say that. Now, the only way to really get at this is for us to really just kind of go to class today. So it's another one of those where we're going to class, and we need to look at this thing as though it's a puzzle that needs to be put together. So first, I just want to look at the core pieces to the puzzle to make sure we understand what they are. Number one, we have a beast, number one, that you heard there, that rises out of the sea. The sea is another piece to this puzzle. Then there's beast number two. You heard about beast number two, who rises out of the earth. That's another piece. And beast number two is described as looking like or having the parts of a leopard, a bear, and a lion. Those are pieces to this puzzle. There is also, you heard, a dragon. That's where it gets really exciting. We've got dragons, friends. Dragons have entered the room. And the dragon gives beast number one his power, which is interesting. And so those are the big kind of key pieces we need to look at here. So now let's look at what those pieces most likely represent, because we are not talking about a literal beast. This is a vision, and it's wildly metaphorical. It has to be. Well, I suppose it doesn't have to be, but that would make a good Netflix show. Now, so let's look at this. This is where it gets messy. First of all, we have the dragon. And the dragon equals Satan. If you go back to chapter 12 in Revelation, it makes it very clear. Chapter 12, oh wait, no, not yet. We'll get there. It's okay. If you go back to chapter 12, Revelation 12:9 makes it clear. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. So that's pretty clear. The deceiver of the whole world, it says. It's also where we get the stereotypical devil costume. There's a description of him there, and it pretty much outlines your devil Halloween costume. We have the sea, which is going to equal chaos and evil and the domain of Satan. That's what the sea is. It's dark, it's uncertain, and all throughout the Bible, particularly the Hebrew Bible, the sea is seen as the domain of chaos and evil and uncertainty. Earth equals order and the domain of humanity, because that was something that people could understand more. You lived on the earth, you couldn't really understand the sea. Beast number one in this scenario equals Rome, and I will outline why in a few minutes. Beast number 2 equals the false prophets, or the deceived church, and we'll outline why in just a minute here. And part of that you see is verse 13:12, you maybe heard, makes that pretty clear. It says, it exercises, this is beast number 2, all the authority of the first beast, I did the beef thing too, of the first beast on its behalf. And it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. That's pretty much what false prophets and a deceived church would do. So now we're going to look more deeply at why these things represent these things. We've got these pieces, we know what they represent, but why? That's the big question. So first of all, there's the dragon, which equals Satan. I already mentioned that. The sea, as I said, traditionally represents the domain of Satan in the Hebrew Bible. So for John to place a dragon, and also in chapter 12, called it a serpent, which harkens back to the serpent in Genesis 3 and the temptation of Adam and Eve. So if John places a dragon in the sea, there's really no debate that this dragon is Satan, since that is the realm of Satan, and it is also the sea also just represents the realm of evil in general. So that's one of the crystal clear things that just about, I think, every scholar agrees on. The dragon, Satan. All right, beast number 1. Here we go. Beast number 1 rises out of the sea, so it must have some kind of evil or satanic element to it, because that's where it's coming out of. But what is it? It's here that we need to look at the description of beast number 1. It's described with the characteristics of a leopard, a bear, and a lion, which is interesting. And to understand this leopard and this bear and this lion, we need to go back to Daniel 7, where Daniel has a vision within which he says this. The first beast in his vision, I lost my place, was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Another beast appeared, a second one that looked like a bear. After this, as I watched, another appeared like a leopard. This is not a coincidence. After this, I saw in the visions by night a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It was different from all the other beasts that preceded it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, what? What is going on here? Daniel's an interesting book. First half of it are these nice little stories of Daniel in the court, and lion's den and all that. Second half, it goes apocalyptic, literally. It gets very strange. So what's going on here? Well, in this vision of Daniel, these beasts are traditionally, through most Hebrew scholarship and Christian scholarship, to represent the empires of the region at that time. And chief among them, Babylon. And Babylon, kind of along with Egypt, is considered to be sort of the consummate enemy of Israel, because they are the ones that led Israel into its biggest exile, and then they even came and sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And so Babylon is considered Israel's chief empire enemy, along with Egypt. So that's what you need to know about what this beast from Daniel is getting at, that is reflected here in beast number 1. What we have in beast number 1 here in Revelation, however, is not multiple beasts like Daniel had. But what we have is taking all of the beasts from Daniel and putting them together into one super beast, one mega beast. Made up of the animals that represent previous empires. This is exactly what Rome was. Rome literally took lots of pieces from different empires to try to build itself up as the biggest, baddest, best super empire the world had ever known. And that includes, of those empires, they took stuff from Babylon. Again, one of Israel's chief enemies. And what happened during the time of the writing of Revelation? Well, just like Babylon did, they didn't lead Rome didn't lead Israel into exile, but Rome sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. So here we have beast number 1 equals the super beast that is Rome. This is what most scholars believe, that it's not just empire in general, it is specifically Rome. So there you go. Beast number 2, it exists on the earth. Now remember, as the sea represents chaos and the domain of Satan, the earth represents order and the domain of humans. The beast's identity of number 2, beast number 2's identity is seen less in symbols like beast number 1 was, and more by what it does, which we read in 13:12 says, it exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and makes the earth its inhabitants worship the first beast. Another trait that is given to beast number 2 is in verse 14. It says, and by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. Whew. Got to take a breath here. Beast number 2 exists in service to beast number 1, who is Rome and deceives people into thinking that the beast is essentially God. So therefore, beast number 2 is the collective that is false prophets. We can see that right in the text. That is what this beast does. It represents false prophets who deceive people into thinking they are serving and worshiping God, but are actually serving and worshiping Rome. And it's emperor, Rome and its emperors. But where it gets really crazy here is more specifically the Emperor Nero is at play here. And all the other kind of Nero-like emperors are at play. The question is, how do we get to Nero? And that's where the famous mark of the beast comes in, 666. This is where it gets kind of strange and seems fabricated, but there's a lot of legitimacy to this. The mark of the beast, 666, equals Nero and Nero-like empirical systems. There's a thing in Jewish tradition called the gematria. Everybody say gematria. I think I'm saying that right. The gematria is a system where Hebrew letters are assigned a numerical value. And this exists because Hebrew doesn't have its own numerals. So it assigns numerical values onto letters, and then that kind of gets you some numerals for them that are actually letters. The letters that get you to 666 spell out the Hebrew equivalent of Kaiser Neron. This sounds like a movie. This is made up. It's not, though. That is what you get to when you add up the value of Kaiser Neron in Hebrew. It equals 666. So we've got Nero himself at play here, but it doesn't say Nero. It says Neron, which is sort of the linguistic plural of Nero, which is where we get Nero and his ilk, Nero and the other emperors and lackeys of his that are like him and operate their empire the same way he does. It is as if to say from verse 13, 18, a little paraphrase coming at the end here, let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is those who propagate, this is my paraphrase. Its number is those who propagate Nero's systems, or its number is the many Neros out there. That's essentially what is going on here. So we have a very specific reference to Nero, which we get this from the text saying that no one without the mark can buy or sell. Did you hear that part? And what is that but the economy? And the economy any economy is essentially one of the core elements of any government, regardless of what that governmental system is. Every government needs an economy. So if you can't participate in the economy without the mark mark of the beast branded on you, you've got some serious things going on here. It is to say that you can't participate in the marketplace, which as I said, is always a chief component to any form of government. To put it another way, it's the economy, stupid, right? All right, so now let's move on to this next piece that I think might breed a lot of questions. I know it did for me, and that's this dead but living piece. Another indicator of beast number 1 being Nero's Rome is that he was an emperor during the period when this book was written, which is roughly 60 to 90 Common Era or AD. But in the year 68, Nero suicided. So he may have already been dead when this book was written. He was either reigning or had already died when this book was written and distributed. But his ways and his means continued. So there is a way in which Nero fits verse 13-14, which says that of beast number 2, by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that has been wounded by the sword and yet lived. When you read that, you might immediately think it's a reference to Jesus. But there's never anywhere in here about this the word resurrection or any kind of sense of resurrection or lordship. It is simply the beast had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. It's like this: Nero appears to have died, but he actually lives on. The word for sword there is a small sword. It's a dagger, which is exactly the weapon Nero used to suicide. And so Nero dies, but his legacy of tyranny lives on in those who followed him and kept moving forward with what he built. So, wow, that's a lot. There's so much more, but we need to move on. So I just want to quickly review, and then we'll see what the heck to do with this. What John is doing here is lifting the veil on our opposition, beast number 1, our adversary, which is literally what the word Satan means in Hebrew. Shatan means the adversary. All of which is to say, the beast may simply look like a governing power that is protecting you and maybe even prospering you, but it's actually a beast under the authority of Satan, the dragon, trying to destroy you and control you and manipulate you. Whew. But as you can see, John is very specific about the powers of this world, and it is in this context, it is his current day Rome, and even more specifically, one of Rome's most notorious and violent leaders in Nero, and all those who prop him up and his ways and ideas. I think what John is doing here is saying this to first century Christians: be wise, be awake, beware about your relationship to Rome. Rome may look good, and there may be false prophets, beast number 2, out there who will deceive you into thinking it even looks like Jesus, perhaps, reflects Jesus' nature and teachings and ways, but it is a vicious beast, says John. And beast number 2, the false prophets, is very effective because it looks like a lamb, but if you listen and look closely, if you let me lift the veil on it, John says, you will see that it speaks like a dragon. Remember that from early on in the text. It looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. Very deceptive. And it's here that is why I've kind of dismissed the book of Revelation. It seems to be specifically about 1st through 4th century Rome. The book was written in that time, and then the Bible was canonized in that time, and so it was very relevant to them. But it actually, I think, is relevant for us for 2 quick reasons. One, it is used today specifically for Christian nationalism. You see, in this whole picture, Christian nationalists believe that America is the antidote to beast number 1. That's what they believe. That we are the chosen nation by God to defeat beast number 1, which would comes out as God's powerful army nation. You can kind of hear that and see that rhetoric in Christian nationalism. Whereas I believe, and many believe, that America is actually a new manifestation of beast number one. I don't have the time to outline exactly how, but I think we could put those pieces together. But if you add up the way the U.S. operates, it looks a lot more like Rome than it does some benevolent nation that's going to rescue the world from tyrannical empires. And I and many others, far more qualified than I, have been saying that for decades. This is not new. This is not specific to our current administration. I've been saying this for 20 years through every presidency in that 20-year span. So it's not unique to this time, but it is amped up right now. So that's the first reason. There's some relevance there because we need to understand how Christian nationalism works. But there's another reason I think that it's relevant. I think Revelation is a cautionary tale for us about the dangers of empire, colonialism, tyrannical governments, and just how deceptive they can be. We can find ourselves worshiping empire at worst, which I think many are doing in our current nation at this time. But we do find ourselves serving empire at best, whether we're worshiping it or not. One commentary that I read said, "You think you're going on a target run, but when you lift the veil, you find you're serving Satan." That's sort of an extreme reductionist way of looking at it, but you get the point about how deceptive empire can be. It calls us to look at government, all government, regardless of what party is in power, with a profound, serious, critical eye. So, happy 4th of July. I honestly didn't plan this to land on this day. I'm almost done. But this is all after another very in-depth week of sermon prep, what I really do think is going on in Revelation 13. And as I said, it's here in week 2 so that we set up a stark reminder of the beast that we're going to be up against throughout the remainder of the series. And I just want to leave you with this. One of the reasons I believe in the separation of church and state is that I think it protects both entities. It protects the state from religious overreach, and it helps religion, and in our case, the church, continue to be what we are to be about. And that is this. There is often a great and violent, death-breeding beast behind governmental systems for as much good as they may seek to do, and often do. But there's still a violent, death-breeding beast behind just about any governmental system. But there is, in the church, a great call to fostering life and beauty into this world. For all of our warts and corruption, there is also still this call that God has not let go of us on, which is to be about bringing life and beauty into the world. And so I think it is all to say that if there is some cosmic apocalyptic battle going on, it's a battle between beauty and the beast. So let's be careful and judicious about whom we serve. Huh? Let's pray. Whew, God, anything that was off there, just may it fly away in the chaff. But just help us to truly be honest as we look at this world and what is going on. And let us also, God, help us be honest about the role that we can play to be generators of life and beauty in this world. God, I believe that is the antidote. Life and beauty is the antidote to this death-breeding beast that seems to always be around us. But you are greater, and we put our trust in you. We put our trust in the power of community, the power of love, the power of peace, and the power of working together for justice. Amen.